thank you so much to everyone for carving out this time, really to remember and to celebrate our precious Sacha. And many of you knew him, loved him, celebrated life with him in different ways. Some of you saw him growing up, some of you saw him later in life. And yeah, we feel him with us in different ways all the time. And yeah, this is just a special moment if we can all really bring ourselves present here for an aliyah for his magnificent, shiny neshama, so that he'll have an aliyah. And yeah, just feeling his love and welcoming his energy with us this evening, as we all learn in his name as a blessing to Sacha. Simone, Michelle, do you want to say something before we hand over to Dr. Cohen?
Really happy for Bradley to take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Simone. Well, here we go. I'm not going to give a whole lecture here. Just share some ideas. I've actually been learning an amazing sefer, amazing book with my father. It's called Gesher HaChaim, which means the bridge of life. And it's talking about the Jewish idea of life and death. And it's very opposite to what the world thinks, because Judaism says that ultimately we have a soul and we have a body. We're made up of two things, a spiritual side and a physical side, a soul and a body. And in general, people think, well, I'm a body, you know, I'm in the material world, I'm a body, and I have my physical needs. And I also have a soul somewhere in there that I am trying to connect to and experience sometimes. But Judaism teaches exactly the opposite, as we often do actually, which is that, well, I'm not primarily a body who has a soul, we're primarily a soul. And the soul comes down into the body for a certain amount of time, and then it goes back. So Judaism actually doesn't believe in death, really. We believe that the body comes and then it goes, but we're a religion of life. And actually Sacha was a Cohen, and he's been Aryeh a Cohen. And it's funny because in other religions, the priests are the ones that deal with death. But in Judaism, the priests, dafka, they're not allowed to go and become defiled by the death energy. And why is that? Because we really teach that Judaism's a religion of life and celebrating life. But our concept of life is eternal life. So this book says an amazing thing. For the soul to come down into a body for a certain amount of years is actually very distressing for it. It's up in heaven and it's really enjoying it up there, having spiritual bliss and spiritual delight. And then to come down into a body with all of our limitations and our issues and our nature and our nurture and all of these things, it's actually very distressing for the soul. So what happens is the soul comes into the body, and what's the first thing it does when it's born? The baby cries. Babies always cry. So obviously it hit the cold air or whatever happened to it, but we teach on a spiritual level it's crying because it's been cut off from its home, from its source. And so the baby, the experience for the neshama of being born is actually kind of a bit of a death. It's a death from the sense of leaving home where you're meant to be. But for all of us, when the baby's born, we're like, Mazel Tov, yay, we're so happy. So that's for the experience of the neshama, we're the opposite. But then at the end of life, for that soul, when the body comes to an end, that soul then goes home again. So for the soul, is actually it's not a terrible thing. The death of the body is just like taking off clothes that you've been wearing for however many years, and you're going back home, and it's a wonderful thing for the neshama at the end. But for us, the ones left over, we're the ones who are crying, and it's very painful for us. So Judaism teaches, obviously, we have to be real with our pain, but to understand that it's not the end. Death isn't the end. So Sacha definitely lives on, but not just in our hearts, definitely in our hearts as well. I often share many lessons I learned from Sacha, but it's more than that. Sacha really does live on, and he sees us. And I often, when I'm struggling to be the biggest person I can in my life, I think of Sacha, and Sasha's like, "Come on, Brad, just get up. Just you could do more. Take responsibility for yourself. Live a values-driven life." I got his like voice. We have different voices in our head. We have a Yetzer Hara, a negative voice, and we have a Yetzer Tov, which is a positive voice. And often my Yetzer Tov sounds like Sacha. It's like, God, what are you doing? What are you doing for yourself? How are you changing? How are you taking responsibility for yourself in the world? What are you growing? What have you done today? So Sacha definitely lives on. So we're talking today a little about mental and emotional well-being, because we know that Sacha and many people have a big struggle with this. So we really got to understand that everyone in general has some level of struggle, mental and emotional struggle. Even if you feel maybe you're not clinically or diagnosed as something, everyone's got some degree of maybe anxiety, or all through stages of our life. Are my children going to get into the right school? Is everything going to go well? We got financial issues. We've always got, life isn't so easy necessarily. It's a bit of a roller coaster, and it's not so easy, and it's not necessarily, I was never taught at school real tools to deal with life. Don't know about, I think I see some English people there. I was taught what an oxbow lake is. I don't know if anyone does geography here, but I know what an oxbow lake is, and I know what happened in 1066. And I know things like that, which is great, but no one ever sat me down when I was like 10 years old and said, do you know what, 10-year-old boy, you're going to face disappointment in your life, and here are 3 tools that you're going to need to use when facing disappointment in your life. No, I never learned that. I never had any real life skills.
Yeah,
I feel that many people, hello Asha, I feel that many people, we haven't been given the life skills we need to deal with this very challenging life. And we've also been given these 2 things that shape us, which is our nature and our nurture. So some people are born with a better nature, and some people are born with a more they get angry easily, or they get jealous. So we have a nature, and we also have a nurture. We have different upbringings. You can have a very wonderful childhood, you could have wonderful parents, but be bullied at school, or you could be difficult at home. So we have our nature and our nurture, and that tends to develop our attitude. Our attitude to life and our perspective on life comes from these factors. But Judaism teaches that at some point we have to take responsibility, rather than saying, this is just who I am. Someone said to me the other day, I'm just a high anxiety person. That's who I am. And I said to them, I hear that. But the truth is, Judaism says that really you're a soul, you're a spiritual being. You're just having lots of high anxiety thoughts. And we've got to try and work with your thoughts. If we can change your thoughts, that's going to change your emotions, because thoughts create emotions. So we can work on these things. So that doesn't define you. Often people, they define themselves by, for example, their negative character traits. So someone said to me, well, it happens often, unfortunately, I hate myself. Rabbi, I hate myself. And I'd say, why do you hate yourself? So they say some of their negative character traits, I get upset and I get jealous. So I say to them, I hear that, but why do you hate yourself? Your negative character traits don't define you. But I feel lots of people, they do. The biggest problem I feel in the world today, and it's not just with teenagers, but it's a lot with teenagers, is that very few people have a very strong sense of self and self-worth. I just don't feel so good about myself. So obviously, definitely with teenagers now, it's more because of the social media, and you have to have a persona, and your WhatsApp and your LinkedIn and your Snapchat and your TikTok and whatever else they do nowadays. But I've got to live up to this image of what people need me to be. I've got to be cool, and I've got to have this car, and I've got to say the right thing, and I've got to drink the right drink and have the right phone. And when you get older, and my kids have to go to the right school, and I've got to do the right. And that really causes kind of stress and anxiety. People don't feel very free just to be themselves. And then people feel a bit down about themselves, and they lost all sense of real self-worth. So Judaism teaches, I think this is the main point of the Torah. The main point of the Torah, the main thing that God wants you to know, and his message to the world is that you are intrinsically valuable and worthy and wonderful and full of light and full of sweetness, and you're healthy and you're connected and you're joyful. That is your natural state of being. That's who you are. And you don't need to do anything to crave recognition from other people, usually, unfortunately, on quite superficial values. So I get my recognition based on, as I say, usually it's physical appearance and material possessions, actually. So we're chasing after physical appearance and material possessions in order to feel good about ourselves, and that will never make us feel good about ourselves. So I found, for me, that the Torah's main point is just know already, and this is where you get freedom from, that you're intrinsically good and healthy. And things like your nature and your nurture, I think everyone here knows that the Jews left Egypt. And the word for Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim. And Mitzrayim comes to the word Mitzarim, which means limitations, constrictions. So obviously, there's many messages in the Torah. It's not just a physical idea, but it's talking about our limitations in life, our nature and our nurture, and our ego and our issues and our problems and all of our stuff. So how did they leave Egypt? What did the Jewish people really need to do to leave Egypt and to get to the promised land, to be free? They had to cross the sea, and the crossing of the sea was representative of changing nature. Basically, the sea turned from water into dry land. And by the way, if this was a historically factual thing that happened or not, it really doesn't matter. It's just teaching us this idea that to leave your own personal limitations, you've got to be prepared to change your nature. And don't say, you know what, this is just who I am, and I can't do anything about it. I took it to the next level the other day. Maybe it was a bit extreme, but someone said to me, come on, I'm only human. And I said, well, that's not true, actually. Judaism says you're really more than human. You're a soul, you're much more than human. But I validated their feelings first before I said that. But I said, you're much more than you think you are. You're much more than you think you are. So really, there are four levels, four aspects of your being. There's the physical part of you, and there's the emotional part of you, and there's the mental and the intellectual part of you, and then there's the spiritual part of you. And Judaism says that really, and all traditions say this, that really what we're trying to achieve in this lifetime, whilst the soul has come down into the body for however many years, that we're trying to achieve our potential. Basically, you're meant to achieve the greatest potential that you can. And we know that Sacha was immensely driven to do that. And we have four aspects of reaching our potential, and that means physical and emotional and mental and spiritual. We want to become the most healthy, self-actualized people in these areas. So obviously physical health, and I'm going to come to a conclusion that probably no one would expect me to come to, but we'll get there in about hopefully 10 minutes. Not going to go on for too long. But physically, we want to really try and be healthy. Lots of our vitality in life comes from physical health. The more we feel lethargic, and if we sleep too much, and if we eat too much, or we eat the wrong thing, or if we're consuming the wrong thing, then we won't have the vitality, we won't have the energy. It's actually a mitzvah from the Torah to look after your health. I think there's lots of religious Jews who didn't read that part of the Torah. Well, I'm talking to them too. But it is a mitzvah from the Torah that you're meant to look after your health. You're meant to be as physically vibrant as you can. And we obviously know Sacha was extremely physically healthy. And then we have the emotional side of ourselves, which is really our whole experience of life is emotions. And for many people, they're on kind of an emotional roller coaster. They're really ups and downs, and there's a whole spectrum of emotions, really, all day and every day, and often, unfortunately, dependent on external circumstances. most people's experience of reality come from the external world. So if things are going our way, we feel good. And if they're not going our way, we don't feel so good. And if people praise us, we feel good about ourselves. And if people insult us, we don't feel good. And if it's sunny, we feel great. And if it's rainy, we don't feel great. And if we miss the bus, then we're a bit upset. And if we get the bus, so Judaism is very, very into letting go of the external world needing to be what we expect it to be, and starting to focus on our internal world, because we can't control the external world. To really, to some extent we can, and we should if we can, but in general what we're trying to do is to learn to have balance in our internal world. So emotional balance, I think we'll define it very quickly by what it's not. Here's emotional imbalance. Emotional imbalance is if you're completely overwhelmed and controlled by your emotions. Your emotions are such a powerful reality that you make decisions based on how you feel. I just feel like eating this whole tub of Ben and Jerry's now, and I just have to. That's not emotionally balanced. Maybe a few spoons of Ben and Jerry's is okay, but to do the whole tub, not necessarily. So one extreme of emotional imbalance is just to be controlled by and overwhelmed by emotions. The other extreme of emotional imbalance is completely cut off from your emotions, completely repressing your emotions, which is what Englishmen are very good at doing. I am one of those. I used to do that until I got married, and my wife was like, come on, I want to be married to a human being here. So I now pretend that I have emotions to my wife. So what is emotional balance? Emotional balance isn't repressing and being cut off from your emotions, and it isn't being completely overwhelmed and controlled by your emotions. It's the ability to experience your emotions, to be really honest and real and experience this. I feel very angry now, I feel very jealous, I feel very sad, I feel in pain now, and be open and okay to feel it, but then not necessarily make your decisions based on them. Just let it flow and let it go. This is another Sacha phrase. Let it flow and let it go, you know? So I feel anger. Don't repress the anger. That's bad. But also don't necessarily go and get into a fight. Just let the anger, the feeling come. Maybe shout if you need to shout, and then just let it go. So that's called emotional balance. Not repressing, but also not being controlled by that. Then we have mental. We have this, we got physical side of ourselves, emotional side, and then the mental side. And it says in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, Ezehu Gibor, who is a strong person, who is a master? And the answer is a Kovesh et Yitzra, the one who learns to deal with their mind, basically. It also says in the final chapter of the Shema, it says, Lo tataru achre levavechem achre enechem, which means don't just go after your what you want and what you see. Don't be controlled by your physical desires and your ego desires. What true self-control is, in Jewish terms, is really that you're making your decisions based on what's the right thing to do. I know what's the right thing to do. So even if I feel like doing something else, if I know it's not the right thing to do, it's basically using my intellect to control my decisions and my actions without repressing our emotions, by the way. Our emotions are also part of it, but when there's a struggle between intellect and emotions, we tend to go with intellect because we know that's what's best for us. And we always have this struggle. We have these two sides of us. For example, when you want to get out of bed in the morning to go for a run, there is one part of you that wants to get out of bed and go for a run. And there's another part of you that wants to curl over and put the blanket over you and snuggle up and be very, very warm. So you got to ask yourself in that situation, what will give me the greatest pleasure and the greatest growth in the long term? And unfortunately, it's often the one that will take more effort, unfortunately. But we know that growth comes through putting in effort. So mental strength means I'm going to start choosing my reality. I want to start choosing which thoughts I'm going to make significant. So for example, if you have an anxious thought, what many people would do when an anxious thought comes is they would build it, and they get more anxious and say, yes, this is going to happen, or judge themselves. I shouldn't have anxious thoughts. I should be better than this, and it's all for the best. And so once we take an anxious thought, for example, and we just feed it, we're fueling it with worry and catastrophizing, then we made it significant. So what our sages teach us to do is it's a meditation technique called habata, actually, is to be able to observe that thought, don't repress it, but not necessarily go with it. To just say, okay, I'm sure it's going to be okay. To be able to, we've often got lots of voices in our heads. So it's being able to choose which voice I'm going to identify with, which voice I want to make real in my head. So if you have one voice saying, I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy, that is one voice in your head, maybe. But you've got another voice, at least my voice from now on, saying, no, you're intrinsically worthy and wonderful. There's one of those voices you can make your reality. You've got to choose. There's actually a famous story about Steve Jobs set up Apple, I think. Anyway, so Steve Jobs tells a story that he was adopted, and when he was 13 years old, his adoptive parents told him that he had been adopted. And the first thought that he had was, oh my goodness, I'm abandoned and unlovable. I've been abandoned by my parents. My parents abandoned me, and therefore I'm unlovable. So that was his first thought. Then his next thought was, hold on, these other guys, they chose me and they love me even though I'm not their son. So I'm chosen and lovable. So he had these two voices in his head. Now, which one's true? Maybe both of them. I don't know, maybe both of them. Actually, apparently his parents were forced to give him away, so he wasn't necessarily abandoned. But let's say they are both true. There was this one couple that abandoned him and didn't love him, but there's other couple who loved him and chose him. So he said at that moment, when he was 13 years old, I had to choose which story am I going to live with. Amazing idea. I'm going to choose which story do I want to live with. I can live with the story of I'm abandoned and unlovable. I can, and I can justify it as well and say, well, you see what happened. But I can live with a different story, and I can justify that one as well. So mental strength is being able to choose which story we want to live with, which thoughts we want to make our reality, which thoughts in our head do we want to identify with. So we say that all of our thoughts, Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah teaches that where do thoughts actually come from? What makes them? And even a neurobiologist is like, what's making the synapses shoot? What's going on? So we say all your positivity is coming from your soul. Your soul's shooting out positive thoughts into you. It's called your Yetzer Tov, your good voice. And your ego, basically your lacking physicality, ego is shooting out negative ones. See, we've always got these two voices, and we've got to choose, well, which one do we want to go with? Which one do I want to identify with? And that's called mental strength. I just want to fully identify with my positivity, my good side, what's good about me. And then we have spiritual. The final level is spiritual. And that means spirituality in Judaism isn't, I do Bikram yoga 5 times a week, and I'm gluten-free and sugar-free, and I smoke weed watching the sunset. That's not spiritual in Judaism, although that might be quite enjoyable. Spirituality in Judaism means I'm actually identifying with and manifesting my soul, my spirit. I feel I'm doing this it's a shift of identity, really. It's a shift of identity as a lacking physical being into a fully perfect, pure, loving, sweet, healthy, kind being. I actually remember one of my rabbis, when I was becoming more observant, he said to me, if you become religious and therefore you judge other people and you look down on them and you say Reformed Jews are this and non-Jews are this and this, he said, you didn't become religious, you became self-righteous. Because the more religious you become and the more connected to God you become, the more loving and more accepting and more acknowledging you become. And the more you see goodness in other people, the more you can identify with your own goodness, the more you're going to be able to see it in other people. And the more you can identify with your own goodness, the more you can deal with the not perfect parts of yourself. So your sense of self, if it comes from, well, I do have good character traits and I do have good values, and I have some not so good parts of myself, but I'm going to work on them. I don't identify as them because once you identify as something, I am this, you can't change that because that's who you are. But once you say, I'm not this, I have this. I have this trait. I have some jealousy. I have some anxiety. I have these things, but they don't define me. Then you can start working on those things, and then you can feel good about yourself for working on the not so good things about yourself. So it's a beautiful idea, because you can feel good about yourself for the good things, and you can feel good about yourself for working on the bad things. So you can feel good about yourself for the good and for the bad, as long as you're working on it. It's a beautiful idea. So I think I'm going to sum up now. I want to give you one of the keys, though, that you might not expect to hear from me, especially because I'm trying to be all spiritual. But what are the keys to emotional and mental well-being? You're going to love this, by the way. You're going to love this. And our sages talk about this. You wouldn't expect them to, but they do. It's called physical nurture, physical well-being. Very often when I'm working with my students and they're overwhelmed by something and they're very stressed by something, I say to them, well, how have you been nurturing yourself? And what does to nurture yourself mean? It means, what are you doing that just gives you basic physical pleasure? For example, and by the way, we need this because it calms down our system a little bit. We're being bombarded the whole time through our five senses, our sight and our smell and our hearing, and just bombarded with, I just heard a police siren there, and I'm in Israel, lots of people shouting at people. I'm tasting things that I don't like. We're being bombarded the whole time with information and stuff, to be able to just calm our physical senses. So for example, and I think this is your practical takeaway, by the way, I'd like you to all write a list of 5 things that you really need in your life that just make you feel taken care of. So for example, a hot bath with lavender oil. That's a good one. Or a glass of wine with my friends on a Thursday night, or a foot massage, or a walk in the park, and just things like that just make you feel nice and taken care of. And those are the things that you don't get around to when you need them most. I always say to people, well, how are you nurturing yourself? And they're like, but I'm too stressed to nurture myself. And you got it wrong. As soon as you notice yourself being triggered and getting too stressed, you've got to bring yourself down. And by the way, this helps in all situations. It helps with anxiety. If you're having anxiety, obviously very, very, very important that if you need medication, to be taking medication. Very, very important. And there's also a difference between being wounded, even deeply wounded, and actual trauma. So there's different therapies for real trauma, rapid eye therapy, you got to release that. So I'm talking about not these very extreme things, but in general, if you're feeling triggered and you're feeling anxious, to bring yourself down into physicality, to smell some lavender oil. One of my rebbes, you just wouldn't expect this. He said to put a piece of chocolate on your tongue and let it melt on your tongue. There you go. So it's not a whole tub of Ben & Jerry's, but you have rabbinical approval now to just get a piece of chocolate and put it on your tongue and breathe very deeply and just feel yourself just calming down. We need to calm ourselves down, basically, because most people are feeling uneasy. Even if people aren't highly anxious, there's an underlying state of, I'm just uneasy because I'm not in control of the external world. But we've flipped the whole paradigm here and saying you don't need to be in control of the external world. Let go of needing to be in control of the external world. Let go of needing people to like you. Let go of needing all of those things and just start turning internal. Go into your internal world, and that includes your physicality. Also, when you can't sleep at night, if you're in bed and you can't sleep, to put on some gentle music and to breathe very deeply and to come into your physical body. So this is my secret. This is tonight's secret. There are many different secrets, but tonight's secret of emotion, we said we got physical and emotional and mental and spiritual. So tonight's secret of emotional and mental well-being is to make sure that the foundation, which is the physical, is really well taken care of. And you have to put that into your day. Don't not do this. It's so important to do this, because if your foundation isn't strong and calm, then the whole structure gets a bit wobbly. And you've got to know yourself, and you got to have a friend or a relative or a partner who can really say, you know what, did you have a foot massage recently? You need a foot massage. Or do you know, go and have a glass of wine. Go and let's just chill out. Someone asked me, what is your number one lesson you want to teach? You did philosophy at university and you lived in Asia for 6 years doing Buddhism and martial arts, and then 13 years in yeshiva. What message do you want to give to the world? And I thought about it and I was like, my message is just chill out, man. Just chill out a bit. There you go. So that's the message. And how do you chill out? By just chilling out. Just chilling out, just chilling out. I'm going to finish on this. Just to mention Sacha again, that his neshama should keep going higher and higher and keep inspiring us all. It always stands out to me that what is a friend? How do you define friend as opposed to accomplice? A friend is someone who wants the best for you. That's what a friend is. I got many people who they're my accomplice, which means they don't want the best for me. They just want the best for them. Come on, let's go to this club. It's going to be fun. And it doesn't matter that you've got an exam tomorrow. We'll just go to the club. It will be fun. But a friend is, you know what? I'm not going to go to the club either, and I'll bring you some pizza. So I guess Sacha was a friend and an accomplice, but we were both for each other, to be fair. But he was definitely a friend. He would literally, Sacha would die for you. Sacha would, he said it, and I really believed him. And when I was with Sacha, I was like, I just feel so taken care of and so loved and so validated. Just validated and just completely living fully for other people. So we should all learn from that. He should go higher and higher, and we should all take responsibility for our lives in his merit. It should be a merit for him. Praise Hashem.
Amen, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Bradley, thank you
Amen.
for
Amen.
this
Wonderful.
friendship
Amen.
that you and Sacha had from childhood to the end. We're so grateful that he had you and that you had him and that you knew him so deeply. And we are so grateful that you've shared your beautiful energy and wisdom with us tonight. And I really hope that everybody really takes heed wherever we're at, that we really, step into that greater self-care, because I know so many people here are always taking care of others and sometimes put themselves second, third, fourth. So let's all do something to activate the real joy that Adar, the month of Adar, brings us, to step into that self-care. And I just want to let everyone know that Dov Ber Cohen wrote a book called Mastering Life, magnificent book, partly his journey. And there is so much wisdom in there, and he's dedicated it to Sacha, which is very special. So I think, I know I've got my copies, but we can get it anywhere, Amazon or whatever. So we can have your wisdom at home with us all the time. So we've got a few more minutes left. If anyone's got any questions, either for Dov Ber Cohen, anything on your mind, or if any thoughts about Sacha experiences that you had, funny, mad, crazy, whatever they are, we'd love to hear those too. So if you want to unmute, it'd be lovely to hear from a few people.
Everything you said was amazing. It really resonated, actually. Just perfect. I'm going to use it in my life, and I'd love my kids to use it in their life. So thank you.
Beautiful.
It was great. It really was wonderful just to go and see him play tennis at the Maccabi games and elsewhere.
He was such a tennis star. I think his name's still up on in the David Lloyd. I remember when he was little with his trophies that used to come in, and in Spain, where Flores used to win all the championships. He used to get so tanned, he was so dark, and come back with the cups. Do you remember, Simon?
Yeah. you couldn't help feeling good when he was around.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, you know, it's 5 years, and the biggest image that comes to me is Sacha's, just his beaming smile. That's what I see mostly, just, and like that twinkle in his eyes and his big laughter. You know, he really loved funny things and really connected with joy. He got really excited about things.
Nikki, maybe just to add, when I think of Sacha, and I've known him for such a long time, when he was running around full of energy as a child, there's so much light that comes to mind, and as you said, that huge smile and such a sweetness, beautiful nature, and it's just such a lovely thing to take away, and to cherish.
Thank you.
So lovely to see the family.
I must say that I find it incredible how I constantly meet people, especially moving back to South Africa, who knew Sacha, people who I never knew Sacha, and the stories they tell and the difference he made in their lives is just mind-blowing. And how everyone who met him, even if it was once or twice, he made such a powerful impression, because I think when he engaged with people, he completely kind of got into their body, into their skin, to really understand them and really want to make an impact and really help and really just constantly ignite potential, ignite, as Bradley was saying, ignite responsibility to create a better life for themselves. And people often, they'll always say, he made such a difference. He shared something with them that got them to see themselves and the world differently. And that was, I think, his mission in this world, was to really make a difference. And he
couldn't
really
help himself. If only he could have helped himself.
Yeah, I mean, he did in many ways for over the time, but at the end,
It's just as he got older, it got worse, and the depression got worse.
I think the pieces just weren't forming, because my view is always that Sacha, because he knew potential of the human soul and the human spirit and the human being, and he so knew that for himself, he knew who he wanted to be and who he could have been. He saw it, he felt it, he experienced it, and when that wasn't matching with certain trajectories and goals he had for himself, I think it was so painful. It was just so painful for him. And then I also get, like you're saying, around the chemical depression aspect that made it so hard. But I do wonder whether that dissonance of knowing what was possible and not being there. I don't know what you think about that, Bradley. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, very much, because we always used to use this example: if you got a Ferrari but it doesn't have petrol, then it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So he had immense mental strength and power and everything, but because of his chemical situation, it wasn't his fault. It just wasn't his fault. He just didn't have the petrol to be there. So he knew where he could get, but he was just being held down by his condition. 100%. Ferrari without petrol.
Yeah. Thank you, Bradley. Thank you so much, Reva. For such a wonderful
A
speech.
pleasure, Revitson.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
The analogy you used around the Ferrari, we've got this great picture. I'll see if I can share it off my screen in a sec, of Sacha by, I don't know if it was a red Ferrari or a red Porsche. And do you have the picture of me when he was a little boy?
He was about 3.
5.
Oh, I've actually found it. I'm going to share my screen. So let's have a look at this. Tell me if you can see the screen. This
Yes.
is the red Ferrari. Yeah.
It's a pity they never had Teslas in those days because you don't need petrol for a Tesla.
Nicole, thank you so much for asking Bradley and for
Well,
organizing.
those were
it.
the people. Eh?
Yeah, thank you, darling.
Thanks, Bradley.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Nicole.
Thank you.